Hello everyone. Today, the story does not begin with major upheavals. There are no intense pursuits. Nor are there truths about to be revealed immediately. Instead, it begins with something very simple. A meal. A meal that seems ordinary, but becomes the place where emotions settle. Where unnamed thoughts slowly take shape. And also where something quietly begins to change. That afternoon, Hai returned home earlier than usual. Not because there was less work. Not because his schedule was empty. But because inside him was a strange feeling. An unclear feeling. Impossible to name. Yet strong enough to keep him from staying at work any longer like before. After many days of thinking. After fragments of memories that came and went. After meetings that seemed accidental, yet left deeper impressions than he expected, Hai realized there are things that cannot continue to be avoided. And there are emotions that, if left to drift away, may never find an answer. And so, Hai decided he needed a quiet evening. No noise. No work. No interruptions. Just a moment of stillness. So he could hear his own thoughts more clearly. He stepped into the house. The door gently opened. The familiar space appeared before him. Nothing had changed. Yet it made him feel much lighter. And then he saw Tiểu San in the kitchen. Still that familiar image. Nothing new. Nothing extraordinary. Yet enough to bring a sense of comfort. She quietly prepared the meal. Each movement slow. Each gesture filled with care. No rush. No noise. No need for many words. Yet it carried a warmth. A warmth not from words, but from presence. Hai stood there watching for a moment. Not stepping in right away. Just quietly observing. As if wanting to hold on to that moment a little longer. A simple moment. But one that made him feel that he was in the right place. After a while, he softly spoke. "What are you making today?" His voice was not loud, but enough for Tiểu San to hear. She turned around. Her eyes met his. A gentle smile appeared. Not forced. Not exaggerated. Just a very natural smile. Just a few simple dishes, try them and see if you like them. A very ordinary sentence. Something that, in any household, could be heard. But somehow, at that moment, Hai felt a bit lighter. Not because of the food, nor because of the words, but because of the way she said it. The way she kept everything so simple, while he was carrying so many thoughts. He sat down. The familiar chair. The familiar table. Everything as it had always been. But the feeling was no longer the same. He did not speak much. Did not start a conversation immediately. Just sat in silence. As if rearranging his thoughts. But his eyes could not hide something. A sense of contemplation. A hesitation. A feeling of standing before something important. Yet not ready to name it. Tiểu San noticed that. From the very first glance. She did not ask right away. Did not rush. Did not try to pull the story out of him. Because she understood. There are things that, if asked too soon, only make people retreat further into silence. There are emotions that need time to find their own way out. And there are words that can only be spoken when someone is truly ready. She continued her work, as if nothing had happened. But in truth, she was listening to every small change from him. After a while, when the space was quiet enough, when nothing felt rushed, Hai softly said, "The other day, I met someone. The sentence was short, without many details, but enough to break the silence. Tieu San paused. Did not turn around immediately. Did not ask further. Just remained calm. And listened quietly. She knew. This was only the beginning. I don't know why, but it felt strange. His voice slowed. As if choosing each word carefully. Like, not familiar, but not exactly a stranger either. A vague feeling. Unclear. Yet very real. Only then did Tieu San turn to look at him. Her eyes showed no surprise. No excessive curiosity. But genuine attention. A kind of listening without judgment. Without quick conclusions. Just being there. To understand. Do you remember him? A gentle question. Without pressure. Yet touching exactly what mattered most. Hai nodded. Without thinking. Without hesitation. Very clearly. 2 short words. But carrying so much behind them. A clarity not from ordinary memory. But from feeling. A feeling he had never experienced before. And did not yet know how to name. The space fell silent again. But this time. The silence was no longer the same. Because. A story. Had begun to unfold. Slowly. Gently. But enough to ensure that everything ahead. Could no longer remain as it was. The story seemed like it would stop there. After unfinished words. After feelings that had not yet been named. Everything appeared to slow down. As if that evening would simply pass in quiet stillness. But at that very moment. There was a knock at the gate. The sound was not loud. But clear enough to break the silence inside the house. Tieu San slightly raised her head. Paused for a moment. As if to make sure she hadn't misheard. The knock came again. Steady. Not rushed. But not random either. She walked out. Each step gentle. Yet inside, there was an indescribable feeling. She opened the gate. It slowly parted. And the first image before her eyes was an older man. He stood there. Not stepping in. Not leaving. Just standing still. As if he had thought for a long time before knocking on this door. His eyes held hesitation. A very clear uncertainty. Yet deep inside. There was a certainty that could not be mistaken. May I ask, is Hai home? His voice was low. Not loud. But carried a careful tone. Tieu San paused slightly. Just a brief moment. But enough for her to realize. This was not an ordinary visitor. She had never met this man before. No memory. No familiarity. But the way he stood. The way he looked. And the way he called Hai's name. Did not feel like a stranger. Not just a casual inquiry. But as if he already knew. She turned inside. Hai, someone is here for you. Her voice remained calm. But her eyes had changed. Hai stepped out. Not fast. Not slow. But the moment he saw the man at the gate. His steps stopped. Not because of complete surprise. But because he recognized him. It was Mr. Trung. The man he had met a few days ago. The one he had thought was just a passing encounter. The atmosphere suddenly shifted. No longer the quiet evening from before. No longer the familiar space of just the two of them. But a presence. Carrying something unclear. Yet enough to change everything. No longer a chance meeting at a cafe. No longer a meaningless conversation. But a deliberate meeting. A chosen action. Hai looked at him. His gaze was not cold. But not entirely comfortable either. A subtle caution. But clear. Mr. Trung looked back at Hai. His gaze did not avoid. Did not turn away. But remained steady. As if he had waited for this moment for a long time. Neither of them spoke immediately. Not because they didn't know what to say. But because there was too much that had not yet begun. Tieu San stood beside them. Saying nothing. But feeling that silence clearly. A silence that was not normal. Not the natural pause between strangers. But the silence. Between people standing before something important. "Uncle, did you need something from me?" Hai spoke first. His voice remained polite. Respectful. But cautious. A distance maintained. Even without words. Mr. Trung nodded slightly. His movement slow. As if every gesture had been carefully considered. "I just wanted to talk for a bit." No explanation. No details. Just a simple request. But behind it was something unspoken. Hai did not refuse. He did not ask further. Not because he fully trusted. But perhaps because he also wanted to know. He gently opened the gate. A small action. But also an acceptance. The three of them walked inside. No one spoke along the way. Just footsteps. Yet each carried different thoughts. That dinner was no longer an ordinary meal. No longer a familiar space for two people. But became a place where three individuals sat together. One who knew the truth. One who was beginning to suspect. And one standing in between. Sensing that something was unfolding. Tieu San remained calm. She poured water. Her movements still gentle. Serving food. Arranging dishes. Everything continued as usual. But that very normality was how she kept the atmosphere from becoming tense. Creating a space light enough. So no one felt pressured. So no one had to rush to speak. Mr. Trung looked around. His gaze did not pass carelessly. But lingered on every small detail in the house. The table. The chairs. The arrangement. The way everything was kept. A place he had never belonged to. Never stepped into before. Yet connected to his life more than any other place. A connection. Unspoken. Yet undeniable. Hai began the conversation. Not going straight to the point. Not asking difficult questions. But choosing simple ones. "Where do you work, sir?" His voice steady. Maintaining distance. Simple questions. Ordinary answers. But the longer they talked, the more time passed. The more Hai felt something was off. Not in the words. But in the way Mr. Trung looked at him. Not like someone newly acquainted. Not curiosity. Not evaluation. Not social politeness. But something deeper. An emotion. Not spoken. Yet visible in his eyes. Like looking at something once very familiar. But lost for a long time. And now, finally seen again. Tieu San began to notice too. She said nothing. Did not interrupt. But her gaze was no longer the same. She observed more closely. Every small expression. Every shift in the atmosphere. And even the silence between words. At that moment, a small incident happened. No one expected it. No one noticed beforehand. The glass in Mr. Trung's hand slipped slightly. Not clearly from carelessness. But as if his hand had lost focus for a brief second. Water spilled onto the table. A small sound. But enough to draw attention. Hai quickly reached out. A natural reflex. "Be careful." His voice was not loud. But carried concern. The moment their hands touched. It did not last long. but was enough to create something unmistakable. Mr. Trung froze. Not because of the action, but because of the feeling. A feeling. So real. So close. Yet impossible to explain. He looked at Hai. Not just a glance, but for a long moment. As if trying to confirm something he had suspected before. Tiểu San saw that look. She did not understand everything. Did not know the full story. But she felt it. And for the first time, she realized the man in front of her was not just a guest, but someone carrying something that could change everything. The meal came to an end. The bowls and chopsticks were slowly set down. The soft sounds of objects touching each other marked the moment the space inside the house grew quieter. But the story did not end that way. Not because there were more words, but because what had not been said was still there. Still present. In their eyes. In their thoughts. And in the silence they each held. Mr. Trung stood up. His movement was not rushed, nor overly slow, but carried a weight that felt different. As if every step had been carefully considered. He seemed as though he wanted to say something. His eyes briefly turned toward Hai. Then stopped. A short moment. But enough to realize he was hesitating. Not because he had nothing to say, but because what he wanted to say was not easy to begin. Thank you for the meal. In the end, that was all he said. A very simple sentence. Something anyone leaving a meal could say. But in that moment, it carried a different meaning. Not just gratitude, but restraint. Holding back everything left unsaid. Hai nodded. It's nothing. His voice remained normal. Nothing outwardly changed. But inside, it was no longer the same. Mr. Trung turned away. Did not look back. Did not say more. Just walked toward the gate. Each step took him farther from that space. But did not take away everything that had happened. Because there are things that cannot leave with a person. But just before he left, he stopped. Did not turn back. Did not look at Hai. Just stood there. In a very brief silence. Then spoke. Slowly. Each word. As if carefully weighed. If, one day, the space seemed to pause. You discover a truth that you never imagined before. His voice grew deeper. No longer polite formality, but something serious. Very clear. He paused. Long enough for the words to settle. Would you choose to accept it or reject it? The question was not long. Not complicated. But far from simple. Not casual. Not accidental. But something prepared. Held back. Waiting for the right moment. Hai did not answer immediately. Not because he didn't understand. But because he knew that question was not meant to be answered right away. Tiểu San stood beside him, looking at Hai. Her eyes were no longer just observing, but recognizing that question was no longer ordinary. No longer something that could be ignored, but a sign. Something was drawing closer. Mr. Trung walked away, without waiting for an answer, without turning back, as if he already knew that the answer would not come tonight. He left, and what remained behind was not silence, but a vast emptiness. An emptiness that words could not fill. An emptiness that forced reflection. That forced memory. That forced confrontation. That night. Hai could not sleep. The room remained the same. Nothing had changed. But the feeling was completely different. He sat alone. Not turning on bright lights. Just enough light to see and to think. He replayed every word, not missing a single one. Every glance. Every way Mr. Trung had looked at him. Unlike anyone before. Every small detail. Things that normally would be overlooked. But now became clearer than ever. Everything was no longer scattered, but slowly connecting together. In a way he was not ready to accept. As for Tiểu San, she had not asked earlier. She had not interrupted when things were unclear. But now, she could not remain silent. For the first time, she asked Hai, "Who is that man, really?" Her voice was not loud, not forceful, but direct. Hai did not answer immediately. He looked outside, toward the gate that had just closed, toward the place where, just hours ago, someone had stood and left behind a question. Impossible to ignore. "I want to know too." The answer was not clear, but it was honest. Because now, it was no longer just curiosity, but a feeling. Very close. Very real. Yet still without an answer. But one thing neither of them knew yet. Or perhaps had not dared to think about. The truth was already very near. No longer scattered pieces. No longer vague feelings. But something that needed just one more step to be revealed. And when it was revealed, it would not just be an answer, but a change. A change that might alter everything. If you've made it this far, perhaps you can feel it too. This story is no longer simple. The smallest details are leading to something much bigger. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you think about everything that's unfolding. And if you want to follow this journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next. Because the story is far from over.
Cảm mọi người đã xem hết video hôm nay của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Câu chuyện hôm nay mình chia sẻ về những người phụ nữ đơn thân sinh sống tại Việt Nam, và qua câu chuyện thì cũng góp phần nào đó xây dựng cuộc sống và giúp mọi người hiểu hơn về cuộc sống của những người mẹ đơn thân sinh sống ở Việt Nam. Mình rất vui và hạnh phúc khi mọi người đón xem những video của mình và ủng hộ kênh của mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hơn để cho mọi người cùng lắng nghe. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích thì nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất, và ủng hộ kênh cho mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hơn cho mọi người cùng đón xem. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở trong những video tiếp theo của mình nhé.